Hello, and welcome back to the Live Label Free podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Sarah, an autism and eating disorder recovery coach and author that's on a mission to help neurodivergent individuals and their loved ones turn their mess into their message. Today's episode is the first episode of my 4-part series on autism and binge eating. This topic has been coming up more and more in the autism and eating disorder conversation, and for good reason. Because while the relationship between autism and eating disorders is well acknowledged, most of this conversation revolves around the restrictive side of the eating disorder spectrum, specifically anorexia and ARFID. Overeating and binge eating are much less discussed. And obviously, this is very problematic considering many autistic people struggle with overeating and binge eating. In fact, a while back I posted an episode titled Autistic Types of Binge Eating, in which I shared 9 different reasons why autistic people may binge eat. I will link this episode in the show notes in case you are interested in listening, but obviously one short episode doesn't really allow one to delve deep into the mechanisms behind the autism and binge eating connection, which is why I've created this 4-part series. In each episode of this series, you'll learn about different factors that may contribute to binge eating in the neurodivergent population. So whether you are a neurodivergent individual yourself that's really struggling with binge eating right now, or you're seeking to better understand and support someone you care for, I hope this series helps you understand the connection and ultimately gain insights so you can have the healthy relationship with food you so deserve. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening, whether that be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or somewhere else to be notified of all the episodes in this series. And if you enjoy this content, it would mean so much to me if you could leave a positive rating and review for the podcast. It helps more people to find the show, and let's be honest, it also makes me feel a bit better about myself and motivates me to continue putting out free content. Now, without further ado, let's dive into part 1 of my series on autism and binge eating.
Gotta put one foot in front of the other, and you'll be around the corner soon.
Welcome to the Live Label Free podcast, where we talk about autism, ADHD, eating disorders, existentialism, and everything in between. I'm your host, Olivia Sarah. Now let's get into it. Before we dive into the connection between autism and binge eating, I believe it is critical we define binge eating to make sure we are both on the same page. So, what is binge eating? Binge eating is characterized by consuming an abnormally large amount of food in a short period of time, which is often accompanied by a sense of loss of control over eating. Unlike overeating, binge eating episodes are marked by intense feelings of shame, guilt, and distress. This form of disordered eating is much more than just having an extra helping. It involves eating rapidly, often in secret, and continuing to eat even when uncomfortably full. While binge eating disorder is often associated with emotional eating and tends to be misunderstood as a way to cope with emotional stress, binge eating behaviors go much deeper than that, especially in neurodivergent people. Like I said in the intro of this episode, this whole series will delve into different reasons autistic people in particular may binge eat. This episode today will specifically discuss interoception, hunger, and fullness, so let's get straight into that. First of all, what is interoception? Also known as the 8th sense, interoception refers to the internal sensory system that helps you perceive and understand your body's physiological needs. It encompasses the ability to sense internal cues such as hunger, thirst, heart rate, and fullness. Autistic individuals often experience reduced interoceptive awareness, which can make it challenging to accurately interpret these bodily signals. This diminished awareness can lead to difficulties in recognizing hunger and fullness, which can contribute to disordered eating patterns such as undereating and overeating. As a young child, I distinctly remember never feeling hungry. At the same time, I wouldn't recognize fullness until I was so overly full that I felt nauseous. Despite this confusion around internal cues, I had a big appetite. I would down bowls of cereal and eat entire boxes of macaroni and cheese as after-school snacks, and I once even stole money from my dad's wallet to buy 5 slices of Starbucks banana bread, only to eat all of them in secret one afternoon. Because I have always had a naturally high metabolism, I quote-unquote got away with eating a lot of food. No one ever commented on my weight or eating behaviors, and I never even thought twice about it until I started learning about health and nutrition at the age of 11. As I write in my memoir, Rainbow Girl, 5th grade health class was like the spark that set off the raging fire of an eating disorder, an illness that I would struggle with for years to come. My literal mind took the concept of there being good and bad foods so close to heart that my black and white thinking prompted me to create all kinds of rules around food. I also started engaging in strict exercise regimens, as I believed eating quote-unquote clean and exercising for a certain amount of time each day was my golden ticket to becoming quote-unquote the perfect healthy eater. While I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa, AN, shortly after the start of my journey to becoming quote-unquote healthy, this diagnosis always felt wrong. I did not resonate with the fear of gaining weight and becoming fat, nor did I struggle with body dysmorphia. What I did despise was the sensory ick that came with a changing body, as well as the increased demands and responsibilities that I knew would accompany adulthood. By literally making myself small and adhering to the rules of a restrictive eating disorder, I believed I would be protected from the big, bad, unpredictable world. The next 7 years of my life were dictated by hospital stays, eating disorder programs, therapists, dietitians, FBT, short for family-based therapy, which is also known as the Maudsley method, which is probably one of the most traumatizing experiences for most autistic people and their families when going through eating disorder treatment. But anyways, I was also written off as manipulative, too complex, and a hopeless case. And yes, I am directly quoting some of the words that the quote-unquote treatment professionals used to call me. Now, it goes without saying that all this time I was racking up major energy debt that, just like credit card debt, needs to eventually be paid back. But of course, I did not know this at the time. I thought I would just gain the weight I needed to be deemed quote-unquote weight restored. I would get my period back, or in my case, for the first time, which I talk about in my episode on autism and PMDD, and magically, I would have fully reclaimed my health back. Unfortunately for me, or from a biological perspective, fortunately for my body, that wasn't quite how the cookie crumbled. It wasn't until after I had gained weight, and mind you, I was at the highest weight I had ever been in my life. I'd gotten my period back, I'd started working out again, and I was doing all the other things that quote-unquote healthy people do. But that was until a new beast was unleashed. Extreme hunger. Just like that, any possibility of me feeling like I had merely a sliver of control left was thrown out the window as I gorged myself in multiple pints of ice cream, entire cakes and pastry boxes, jars upon jars of peanut butter and Nutella, family-sized bags of granola, and pretty much anything you can think of that society has labeled as junk food. Going through extreme hunger was absolutely terrifying for me because I believed I was now quote-unquote swinging to the other side and developing binge eating disorder. Now, you may or may not resonate with a history of restriction, and if you don't, not to worry, because I will be explaining reasons for binge eating in autistic people without a past of restrictive eating disorder. But before we dive into that, it is critical that you understand what extreme hunger is and why it's different from binge eating disorder. Because if your body is restricted of nutrients in any way, your survival will always be your body's priority, and any strategies to combat binge eating will not work. So what exactly is extreme hunger? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. Okay, but for real this time, extreme hunger is the completely normal biological phenomenon of a heightened need for food after a period of restriction. It's often described as feeling like you're a bottomless pit, which I definitely related to. During my extreme hunger episodes, I would eat massive amounts of calorie-dense food, only to somehow never feel satisfied, and literally would keep eating until I was so full and so nauseous that all I could do was lay on my bed in agony. As I just explained, I seriously feared that I was developing binge eating disorder. I mean, all of my behaviors matched the diagnosis: eating large amounts of food, eating rapidly, and feeling guilty after eating. And according to Dr. Google, I seriously was a binge eater. But the thing is, when you've been restricting your energy for a prolonged period of time, what's happening internally is that you're building up a negative energy balance. Just like if you rack up credit card debt by spending money that you don't actually have, going on with your day-to-day life and failing to properly support your energy expenditure is going to cause you to build up an energy debt. Just like credit card debt needs to be paid off, so does energy debt. Extreme hunger is the solution to restoring energetic balance. Eating very large amounts of food, specifically calorie-dense, highly palatable and delicious food, is your body's innate way of getting you to restore weight, heal the internal damage caused by restriction, and to provide your nervous system with a sense of safety and trust. We will be talking about this nervous system component later on in this neurodivergent binge eating series, because nervous system dysregulation can be a huge factor in and of itself for why autistic people may binge eat, whether the person has a history of restriction or not. But for now, let's come back to distinguishing extreme hunger from binge eating disorder. Although extreme hunger behaviors are practically identical to the behaviors exhibited over the course of binge eating disorder, there's one extremely important factor that separates the two. And that is this concept of restriction we've been talking about. If your body is still in energy deficit, or you still have energy debt that needs to be paid off, your body physically needs all the calories it can get, and thus we cannot speak of binge eating disorder. If you're in this camp, whether you're dealing with extreme hunger or are now dealing with what you think is binge eating after a period of dieting or another form of perhaps unconscious restriction, I highly recommend you read my book, How to Beat Extreme Hunger: Find Food Freedom Without Losing Control. This book dives deep into what extreme hunger is, why it happens, when it happens, who it happens to, and how to deal with everything that accompanies the extreme hunger experience, including digestive issues, hormonal changes, and key mindset shifts you need to make if you want to fully recover from an eating disorder. You can grab either the audiobook, ebook, or paperback now at livelabelfree.com/extreme hunger book. And if you're a more visual learner and prefer videos and presentations and want tangible action steps to guide you through the extreme hunger process, I also have a course called Extremely Hungry to Completely Satisfied that pairs beautifully with the book. You can learn more about my course at livelabelfree.com/course. So now that you understand the role of interoception when it comes to autism and eating disorders, and you understand how extreme hunger is distinctly different from binge eating disorder, we can move on to all of the reasons why autistic people may overeat or binge eat. In the next episode of this series, we'll specifically be diving into the sensory component of food, which goes hand in hand with nervous system regulation. If you enjoyed this episode, please like this video if you're listening on YouTube, or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave a positive rating and review, subscribe wherever you are listening, and I'll talk to you in the next episode. Bye-bye for now.
Baby, just one foot in front of the other, and you'll see